I'm Robert Griffin, the Executive Minister here at the Sunshine Cathedral in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I want to thank you for joining us for worship via the internet today. And if you are ever in the Fort Lauderdale area, let me personally invite you to stop by and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. We also invite you to join us on our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter. But for this moment, let's go inside and see what exciting worship opportunity lay in store for us.
Sunshine Cathedral is a different kind of church where the past is past and the future has infinite possibilities. This is the day our God has made.
Of prayer. You, God, are supreme and holy.
You create our world and give us life.
You have always been with us.
You are infinitely generous and good beyond all measure.
You are with us now.
You empower us to be your gospel in the world.
You overcome death.
You are our God. We worship you. Amen.
Our first reading is from the Wisdom of Osamu Daze. Even if Mary gives birth to a child who is not her husband's, if she has a shining pride, they become a holy mother and child. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Our second reading is from the Wisdom of Ada Faye. Imagine someone today becoming conscious that all life is divine. The first necessity of all creation is light. The first creative word was, "Let there be light." Every child is a creation, a divine creation. Divine illumination came to Mary's inmost consciousness. First the light, understanding, inward illumination. Then next, the power of the highest shall overshadow thee. The birth of Jesus was a natural birth, and Mary was the first who perceived the divinity of it. Mary was a consecrated soul. The divinity is what is born of God, and that means every child. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Our third reading is from the Gospel according to Luke. Mary rushed to her cousin Elizabeth. As soon as Elizabeth laid eyes on her, she was filled with excitement and shouted out, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb." And Mary began to pray, I'm bursting with God news. I'm dancing the song of my God. God took one good look at me, and look what happened. I'm the most fortunate woman on earth. What God has done for me will never be forgotten. The God whose very name is holy, set apart from all others. Divine mercy flows in waves after wave on those who are in awe before God. God scatters the braggarts and knocks tyrants off their high horses and pulls victims out of the mud. The starving poor are invited to a banquet. The selfish reap what they have sown. God has promised grace and mercy, and that promise is good, especially right now. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
She was just barely a teenager, much more girl than woman by the way we measure such things today. She had spent the whole of her short life in a small backwater town, 2 or 3 days' travel from the nearest big city. She was country. As is often the case for country village girls, she had a role in her community she was expected to play. She didn't have many choices. Choice was a luxury for other kinds of people in other kinds of places. She kept her head down, did what was necessary to fit in, accepted the limitation of a life with few options. In this, she was no different than every other woman in her community. Her friends, all those who had come before her, all those who would come after her. But then all of that changed for this unmarried teenage girl the day she turned up pregnant. How on earth did it happen? And who exactly was the father? No one knows for certain. But that didn't stop them from making assumptions, drawing conclusions, rendering judgments. You can trust and believe they talked about that teenage girl and her pregnancy to no end. Tell you the truth, they're still talking about it one way or another to this day. This pregnancy put everything at risk. Her parents had made plans to better her life and their own through an arranged marriage for her. That was in serious jeopardy now. In fact, her prospects for any kind of good life at all had just gotten considerably worse. She felt with blistering force both the worry and the shame that were in her parents' eyes whenever they looked at her. That was 1,000,000 times worse than the silent stares from neighbors, even worse than the painful distance her childhood friends now kept from her. And it began to affect her. More and more, she struggled against the feeling that maybe they were right to look at this life, this destiny, this truth growing inside of her as something to fear, to be ashamed of, to reject. Something that threatened to ruin her life before it could really begin. It didn't start out that way for her. When she first discovered that she would bring new life into the world, it was like being filled with the very radiance of the divine. The truth of her pregnancy penetrated her spirit like the mighty voice and glorious presence of an angel. This was a gift, an unimaginable, unexpected, and wholly wonderful gift from God. Though some part of her knew from years of conditioning that this would not bode well for little country village life, she was at that moment nonetheless enraptured by the sheer blessedness of it. She felt whole. She felt the rightness of God's purpose and plan for her. She was overshadowed by the divine peace that only comes of knowing who you are in the world and what unique gift you bring to it. And I wonder today if her story is not also our story. Perhaps we too can remember a moment when we came to know something deeply true about who we are, or about our hopes and dreams, or about the gift we carry within us for the world. Maybe our angelic moment of realization came as we shared that first forbidden touch in the safety of a camping tent or under the covers of a sleepover. Or maybe it was after we snuck into Mom's closet and caught that first glimpse of ourselves in the mirror, looking absolutely fabulous in clothes we were not supposed to be wearing. Perhaps it was when we first read something, or watched something, or met someone who sparked within us the audacity to believe that we could do and be whatever we wanted in the world, even though such dreams seemed out of reach for people of our gender, race, socioeconomic, or disability status. Whatever it was, that moment for us was pregnant with joy and hope and purpose. But it didn't take long before the environment around us threatened to suck that joy out of us, dash that hope, and turn us away from that purpose. We learned what it was like to face derision, shame, judgment, perhaps even violence to our bodies and our spirits. What started with an amazing enunciation of our sacred identity and divine purpose became something to be hidden, to be ashamed of, to despise, to put behind us. Yes, her story may also be our story. It almost proved too much for her, this isolation, this feeling like she was the most broken person in the world. How easily she could have succumbed to the negativity, the shame, even the danger of her circumstances. She'd been told about other girls, even seen it for herself once before. Their lives completely ruined. Some were run off, completely disowned, and left to scrape out a life God knows where, doing God knows what. Some had become victims of violence, assaulted, maimed, even killed when word spread about their shameful condition. Some had even hurt themselves. Still others had completely given up on the gift itself, hiding it for as long as they could and then disappearing from sight for months until they finally returned empty-handed, the hope gone from their eyes as they tried to forget that they had ever carried such a treasure within themselves. That would be worst of all, she thought. Struggling, but still holding on to the belief that her horribly inconvenient truth was actually God's miracle and not some mistake. She decided that she had to do something quick, or she might just succumb to the negativity. She might just exchange hope for despair. She might join the chorus of derision all around her and come to despise the very thing that had made her feel so complete and filled with happiness. She had to get out of that place, even if for only a little while. She needed to be surrounded by a different energy. She needed a friendlier, more sympathetic perspective. Surely somewhere there was someone who could identify with her enough to allow her to express her truth, to give her the space to explore and embrace the gift she had been given. She remembered her cousin, who was also pregnant. Though she was married and much older and lived a considerable distance away, she thought there might be a lot in common between them. She heard her own family talking about her cousin's pregnancy with the same lack of enthusiasm they had for her own. Her cousin was so old, too old to have a child, really. She would almost certainly die giving birth, they said. The baby might die as well, or worse, come out damaged in some way. Her husband had been afflicted with a terrible disease. Some said, cursed by God's own hand. Either way, he was unable to speak, and that meant his ability to provide for his family was in serious doubt. Yes, they had nothing good to say about her cousin's situation any more than they did about her own. If the older woman had somehow found any sort of happiness or peace or hope or pride in the face of that negativity, then just maybe in her cousin's company, she might find some of the same for herself. The journey would be long, lonely, and not without the risk of loss. But she knew it was a risk she had to take if she hoped to fully embrace her truth. So she left the security of home, the comfort of what was familiar, and she set out on a lonely journey, hoping to find a connection that might affirm what she still dared hope for in her heart. And find it she did. In her cousin's open arms and words of love, she discovered a source of much-needed strength and affirmation. Instead of judgment, she found acceptance. Instead of derision, she found validation. Instead of being shamed, she found herself being celebrated. Instead of isolation, she found community. Yes, just maybe, her story is our story today. Somewhere along the way, whether it was a lifetime ago or here and now in this very moment, we decided that we were done listening to the voices that would keep us down and hold us back. We made the choice to distance ourselves from voices that called on us to deny the sacred value of our deepest truth. We left behind the places that eroded our conviction that our divine purpose and our greatest happiness are in fact the same sacred pursuit. We walked away from all that mocked the legitimacy and the value of the gifts we have to share with the world. And we found instead people and communities where we are fully received, where our sacred value is honored and our unique gift to the world is celebrated. It happened for me when I left behind a ministry, a marriage, a community, an entire life that tragically did not reflect what I had discovered to be my truth. I was alone and truly frightened. But I held out faith that somewhere across the dark expanse of the unknown lay the life of truth and happiness that I was meant to live. I found it in the embrace of a small church with an open table and even more open hearts, where a mighty woman proclaimed from the pulpit, "Child, you are exactly who God intended you to be. You are the gift God wants to give to the world." I found it in the sound of countless Harley V-twin engines roaring to life at my very first Pride Parade. Vibrating deep into my chest and causing me to break down in uncontrollable sobbing as it unlocked all the pain and despair I was carrying around from what I had lost. Those dykes on bikes, like splendid angels of light, proclaimed the joyous truth that I had come home to my true community. It was a community of celebration and solidarity, and one that, with my help, had something wonderfully prophetic to say to a broken and divided world. Yes, her story is my story, and maybe it is your story as well. The embrace she received from her cousin, the wisdom and affirmation, the celebration and support. After such a long and lonely journey, after so much pain and doubt, after struggling for so long to hold on to belief in the truth of her amazing gift, that love and connection she suddenly felt unlocked something deep within her. And she began to sing. It was a joyous song, one for the ages. She proclaimed with renewed conviction the divine blessing reflected in the truth of her life and the gift she had uniquely been chosen to share with the world. But she sang of even more than that. You see, her bold choice to leave behind what did not affirm and celebrate her sacred value and the legitimacy of her divine purpose, her courageous journey to find a place of life-giving connection had allowed her to experience the triumph of hope over despair, of justice over oppression, of liberation over bondage. It gave her something that she realized had now become a part of the gift she was giving to the world. God had not just blessed her with sacred value and a divine purpose. God had also allowed her to experience that great divine work which sets people free, which overcomes unjust systems, and which gives the downtrodden a hope and a future. And maybe her song is also our song. Perhaps as we have moved away from that which would diminish who we are and compel us to abandon the unique gifts we have been given to share. Perhaps as we have found communities of celebration and support in which to thrive, we too have discovered even greater depths to what our lives bring to the world. Perhaps we can look at the hard journeys we have taken as well and see within our own overcoming a confirmation of the goodness of God we could not have known had it not been for the struggle. A story we too can tell of a God who empowers the lowly and the downtrodden to leave the brokenness of their past in the past and to embrace instead a future of infinite possibilities as people of sacred worth bearing equally sacred gifts. Yes, I truly believe this morning that the story of this courageous, blessed girl is absolutely our story as well. And that is very good news indeed. Amen. Amen.
Thank you for joining us today here at the Sunshine Cathedral. If you're ever in the Fort Lauderdale area, we invite you to stop by and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. If you'd like to make a donation to the Sunshine Cathedral, or if you'd like to find out other resources that the Cathedral has to offer, please visit us at www.sunshinecathedral.org. Until the next time, we look forward to seeing you here at the Sunshine Cathedral.